Hi everyone, I'm Aaron Weed, and I'm going to show you how you can take a toggle clamp like this that has a normal length stop on it and make your own extension so you don't have to go buy another toggle clamp to do that. This is what I ended up with here. This is about 6.5 inch length rod. I could make it longer if I wanted to, and all it uses is the threaded rod, a piece of scrap wood, a T-nut, and an old plumbing washer, and a little bit of epoxy to hold it all together. But really a rather simple setup. I did make one change where I added a wing nut on here to make it easier to adjust. But here's how I did this. This is the Crosscut Sled I made for dados. It has a channel in it to attach the toggle clamps. I made these wooden blocks to hold the clamps to the fence so that the clamps were not permanently mounted to anything and can be used for other projects. The toggle clamp just slides into the block and no tightening is needed. Here is the distance I need to make up for so that I can dado thinner pieces of wood. I will first dismantle the current extension by simply removing the nuts. I'll store the short extension to use on another project later. Next, I measure the distance to see how long the new threaded rod needs to be. Make sure there are enough threads above the top nut so that your rod can be secured properly. It looks like 6.5 inches will work well for this project. I take the threaded rod, clamp it down, and then hacksaw it. The threads at the end cut are now a bit rough from the hacksaw. I just take a file and smooth the end. Then put a small angle on the edge to make it easier for a nut to start. Here, the nut threads on easily. Now I will assemble the rod by putting on the bottom nut. Then add the sliding washers. And finally, applying the wing nut. I used a wing nut this time since it allows me to make height adjustments without the use of tools. Now a test run to make sure the length is good and how easily it adjusts with the use of a wing nut. Now I'll make the holding pad using this piece of red oak scrap. This is a board that was scrapped from a wood flooring project, so it is well seasoned. I will eventually cut the pad in a square shape, but the piece will be easier to drill if I keep the board long for now. I made the board just a little wider and taller than the T-nut and will cut the length just a little larger than its biggest diameter. I've already marked the center of the board width and will now mark for the center of the pad so I know where to drill the holes for fitting the T-nut. Make sure to use a Forstner bit that is just slightly wider than the base of the T-nut. Drill just deep enough so that the base is slightly below the top of the board. Next, I will drill a hole for the threaded tube to go into. Set the depth to just above the bottom of the board so that you don't have a hole coming out of the bottom. T-nuts have prongs to help hold them in place. However, since I am using oak, the wood will split easily unless I drill pilot holes for the prongs. To mark the locations of the holes, just simply insert the T-nut and tap it. Now you have perfect marks. The drill bit I am using is wider than the thickness of the T-nut prongs because the prongs are pretty narrow. But the bit is narrower than the width of the prongs so that the angle of the prongs can help hold it in place. Here you can see how easily the T-nut sets in place. I won't pound it in all the way just yet. Now you can cut the pad to its square shape. Using a combination square, I can set the line on the top and then transfer the line down to the edge. This edge line allows me to line up the cut to the edge of the saw blade. The next step is to make the pad into a circle shape. I like to use my edge sander for this. It would be easier to use a bench-mounted disc sander, but I don't have one of those since I really like using my edge sander these days. The trick to doing this, without making your piece go airborne, is to use light pressure against the belt. Light pressure also helps to make a cleaner circle shape. You could make a jig for this, but I want this project to be quick with minimal cost. I'm not looking for perfection, I just want to have a decent pad to hold wood.